Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We are thrilled to have you listen in on how you can improve your functionality in Workday Expense Reports. My name is Stephanie, and I will be your moderator for the webinar today. So before we get started, I would like to run through the house rules. Everyone is on mute and will remain muted for the duration of the webinar. The chat function is available. So if you have any questions you'd like our experts to answer during the question and answer section at the end of the presentation, please be sure to send those over via chat. And we will, if we do not get to your question, we will follow up as soon as possible after the webinar to make sure you get your questions answered. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded, so it will be available for playback tomorrow. So with that, I will hand it over to our first speaker to take it away. Justin, it is all yours.
Thank you very much. So good morning or good afternoon, y'all, and welcome to Improving Your Reimbursement, Often Forgotten Functionality in Workday Expense Reports. My name is Justin Gorman. I'm a senior manager in our CVS practice over financials. I've been in the ecosystem for right around 4 years or so, and I've been in ERP consulting for working on a decade, based out of St. Louis, Missouri. Noman.
Hey, this is Noman Lashkaria. I'm a manager in the financials practice. Been a collaborative for around 4 years now. I'm based out of Chicago.
Hi everyone, I'm Nancy Lee. I'm a principal consultant in our financials practice. I've been with Collaborative for almost 3 years now, and I am one of the expenses product leads.
Perfect. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on this slide, but I do like to just throw it up just to give everybody kind of an idea as to who Collaborative is. So I like to point out just a couple of things here. First and foremost is that we were financials customer number 3. So basically what that means is that anytime I do an expense report, I'm logging in, I'm doing the exact same thing as you guys. I'm looking up an expense item, I'm making sure that all the amounts are in there, etc. So this topic is really near and dear to me. I've been traveling for work for right around 9 or 10 years now. So doing expense reports is always a pain. So the faster that I can get it done, the better off I am. And I want to make sure you guys have that same opportunity. That 98% customer satisfaction, this is something I'm super proud of. This just means that if you guys are happy, then we're going to be happy. And that's really what matters to us. And then last but not least is the Best Workplaces to Work Award. So I personally enjoy this, not just because I enjoy where I work, but likewise, what this means to you guys as clients is that the same people you start your project with or that you're continuing to work with in CVS are the same resources that are going to be there. This is really, really important to us just from a turnover perspective, because the more we get to know you, the better you get to know us. And really that's what matters to us, is you guys and making sure that you're happy. So here's our agenda today. So there's a couple of things I'm excited to talk to you about. First and foremost is travel profiles, something relatively simple, but actually does save a ton of time. So I'm gonna make sure we kind of talk a little bit about it. Some of the credit card and expense item optimizations, some stuff that came out in like Workday 32 or so, and then those custom attributes, which are always super slick. Then I'm gonna chuck it over to Noman. He's gonna go through embedded analytics, alerts and notifications, and then we should have a little bit of time for some additional Q&A. So I'm super excited. All right, y'all, so travel profiles. So this is something that I actually didn't fill out at Collaborative until I'd worked here for almost 1.5 years or so. And I was sitting there and I was looking at it and I was like, travel profile, like I totally skipped that step in onboarding. It was something I was going to worry about later. Let's take a look at it. So essentially what it does is it allows you to default in like your preferred vendor for, say, like an airline or a car agency or your travel country. And then likewise, if you have a personal vehicle or like a company vehicle, rather, it can actually default in that as a business asset. It's something that doesn't take a ton of time. I mean, literally, you can fill out this particular task in 3 or 4 seconds, but it's super, super nice because the second you put in airfare or anything that's actual like an airline, it'll default in, yes, I normally fly Southwest. Yes, I normally fly Delta. Or if you know that you kind of switch between two, it'll actually pull it down into a really, really short list and then have that default in correctly. So traditionally speaking, this is employee as self, right? So this is something that, you know, hey, go tell people to fill this out whenever they get onboarded, and they can go from there. But if you're like me and you totally skip that step, there's a couple of ways that we can actually do this en masse or individually, depending on your security. So it's security of the expense data entry specialist, which is a company-based role. However, what we can also do is we can push out a to-do step off of like a talent profile. So that's also something kind of cool of we can write a custom report, see who's filled it out and who hasn't filled it out. And then you could either do it via EIB or via, you know, that sort of self-service type thing. So let me hop in here. So the task is edit travel profile. Likewise, you could find this on the expenses worklet if you start out there. So because Logan, and I'm in our GMS tenant, by the way, so for those of you that don't know, this has just got some standard Workday configuration that we've added a little bit to. So I'm in as Logan McNeil, which isn't traditionally the finance user, but I wanted to kind of switch it up a little bit. And this is her specific travel profile. So what this means is that anytime she goes to create an expense report and there's an airline type expense item, United or US Airways will default in for a smaller choice. I actually have changed this to Enterprise. So I don't know if you guys heard, I'm based out of St. Louis, Missouri. Enterprise is based out of here. They're a Workday customer, which is kind of slick. And then the hotel, she's got a couple of short seasons. Logan's a little bit fancy. She gets to stay at the Four Seasons in the Ritz. I'm more of a Marriott guy, but to each their own. So let me show you guys what this looks like, knowing how it looks here. So I'm going to do create expense report. And now I'm just going to fill in some of this information like memo, and she's going to a conference, so this part's pretty easy. And this is going to be the real meat and potatoes of what I'm going to talk about today. That's super exciting. So let's hop in here. Going to add an expense line. All right, so first things first, I'm just going to choose airfare. And as we notice, no airline populated here. However, we do have this preferred airline search, United and US Airways. But if I choose, say, a car agency or car rental, Enterprise automatically populates in as well as the country. So this part's super nice, right? So now all I have to do is fill out, it was $100, go through, chuck in a receipt, etc. And I don't have to fill in all this extraneous information. I think this is probably something that's really easy to forget just because it is an employee itself. It's not something you traditionally fill out on behalf of your users. But what it does is all that additional stuff that you might want to collect that you're like, well, how worried are you about how long it takes for them to fill out their expense report, et cetera? This can actually help speed up this process pretty significantly. So there's travel profiles. And now let me talk about just a couple other things. So credit card and expense item optimizations. This to me is really, really cool. It's something that not everybody takes advantage of whenever they first get into Workday. So you're normally running through your implementation, you've got a little bit of time to test out some of these integrations, but validating level 2 and level 3 data, and likewise this credit card expense mapping will save you and your end users a ton of time, okay? So this credit card expense mapping is something that I have completely forgotten about in implementations before just because we haven't had time to do it. But essentially what it is it takes a merchant category code, or those MCC codes, which is a generic classification of the type of store that you're purchasing on, right? So let's say, for example, that we have a merchant category store of bookstore, okay? Your local mom and pop shop that like, hey, it's just down the street, it's on a local square, they're not a huge business, they sell a couple of little books, stuff like that. They would have that generic merchant category code of bookstore, and that exact same mom and pop shop might store another one that's like a regional bookstore or maybe like a school bookstore or something like that. But there's also larger associated vendor merchant category codes. So there's a certain dollar threshold that you have to hit in order for that merchant category code to be defined. It's kind of dependent on each one of your credit card networks. Could be up to like 2 million or like depends on volume a lot of time. So your Barnes and Nobles of the world are going to have its very own MCC. Okay. So what this means is that you can actually map one of those MCC codes directly to an expense item. So anytime I see Southwest airfare come through on my expense card, it will automatically map to airfare. Now, if for whatever reason that's not the correct expense item, so you don't really want to map Amazon just because there's so much stuff you can buy off of Amazon, but you want to change it from office supplies over to, let's say, books, right? So you're reading off your Kindle. You can change the expense item that will automatically default in. So you can choose the individual suppliers, depending on if they're large enough, or the generic type of store that you want to route to this expense item. So if I see a local bookstore of like 15067, something like that, 1506, it will route to books. Whereas anytime it sees Barnes & Noble, that's 159875, that's also going to route to books. Okay. So the task in Workday is maintain credit card expense code mapping. So GMS already has this filled out, which is super cool. But what it does is it automatically populates with every single expense item that you have available. Okay. So on here, we see a couple of different examples. We see O1 as airline. So anytime you swipe your credit card and it sees that O1 designation, it's going to automatically route to airfare. Likewise, if it sees United, American, Air France, Lufthansa, etc., all of those will populate it. Now, hotel accommodations doesn't have anything. However, if I type in, say, O2, oh, Lord, it's O3. There we go, lodging. So anytime you see a generic designation of lodging, it's going to pop into a hotel accommodations, and then I might be able to choose, say, a Marriott or a different airfare, excuse me, a different hotel. You would be able to route that directly there. And then likewise, if you see meals or car rental and fuel, that will automatically pull in. So when I go to that create expense report task, you'll actually be able to see where each one of these individual values defaults in based off of. So on here, this expense item is right there. If you didn't have anything mapped for that particular credit card, so if you don't have wine bar mapped to say entertainment or alcohol, because let's be honest, you could buy some food at the wine bar, this would just be blank. All right, so now we've got level 2 and level 3 data, and then the very next one, we've got some custom attributes against expense items. So I'm gonna hop through these. One thing I am gonna ask, I'm gonna ask Nancy, our expense product lead, to actually post this particular Workday community chat into there so that you guys can follow this idea. So for those of you that don't know, level 2 and level 3 data is all the extraneous information that a credit card might, or that a vendor might actually see or send on behalf of that information. So with Southwest, they will actually send your departure location, your arrival location, your trip start date, your trip end date, sort of arrival date and departure dates. They'll say where that individual company is based out of. There's all this extra cool stuff that they're sending on behalf whenever they're in that vendor that not everybody captures. So almost no customers that I've ever worked with have ever captured departure date and arrival date, right? And the reason why is it's just, well, if I really want to see that information or I want to validate that, I'll just pull up the receipt. I don't want to make every single time someone creates an expense report to go and fill out that information. By having this data mapped in Workday, it will automatically populate every single line, okay? So this is only available for certain portions of information right now. So the reason why I wanted to post that idea in here is because it's not available for everything, like full hotel folios are not available as of right now, but that is part of level 3 data. So Workday is working on it. Right now it's only available for MasterCard and Visa as well. So if one of those 2 cards is what you're currently utilizing, go through and take a look at some of the extra data that they're sending, because not only will Workday automatically map it for you, but also you don't have to go through and do anything, right? So like you just change your expense item so it's available and then it's there. So let me show you what that looks like. For those of you who don't know, you can actually pull up this airfare onto the side and there's going to be a whole bunch of cool stuff right here. Okay, so this is what the individual credit card line item looks like on the create expense report task. This is really the stuff that I'm talking about. So we've got a departure date, arrival date, origination city, destination city, where you're routing from, class of service. So this class of service is actually super slick. So what this does is this actually allows you to go in and audit the type of service that you're going in and having your employees expense. Not everybody requires someone to go through and do that, but you can actually write a report of individual expense lines, pull in this class of service value, and then you can validate what they're putting in versus there if you don't have it automatically mapped. Takes a little bit to figure out what each one of these are. I mean, Delta has a little bit of a different class of service value than say Southwest, but it's not too bad. So let me edit that airfare expense item and you'll see, actually, I'll just pull it in real quick. So I'm gonna hop into my expense lines. As we can see, it already populated in airfare, right? Because of that merchant category code mapping, and this airline piece was on there, but destination was also required. But let's add in that arrival and departure date. So we don't currently have it collected. I don't want everybody to fill it out. So let me just close this. I'm gonna have to cancel this expense report as well. GMS USA. There we go. And I'm going to choose today. Let me cancel that one. Okay. So let's edit the expense item of airfare. And then I am going to add in departure date and arrival date. And naturally, I want to make sure this is exposed. I don't want someone to have to fill it out. So if they don't swipe their credit card, I don't want to have to make them do it. But if they do, it's sort of a win. Hey, by doing this, you're going to automatically have it be populated. Okay. So now let's create that expense report again. Pull in that exact same airfare. And now when I hop into expense lines, that departure date and that arrival date is already there. So really all this takes is going through, taking a look at your individual expense reports, seeing what those expense credit card transactions are, popping it up into a new tab and seeing some of that additional data, editing your expense item so that it has whatever you're looking for. Like if you want to have departure city, arrival city, etc., you can add those in. And that's really all you have to do. It's already mapped for you. So this part is a huge win. It takes away a lot of what people might already be filling out. But likewise, it'll just give you all sorts of extra information that you might be collecting or you might not. So last but not least are these custom attributes. So this is something that came out relatively recently. So it was before the 2020 R1 or R2, whatever it is now, right? It's Workday 32, but it allowed you to configure custom attributes against each one of your expense items. So this was always a pain point in implementations in the past, is whenever there's a like a regulatory requirement within expenses that you might not be able to meet with all the Workday standard fields. So people just end up sort of hijacking a memo field. So now you can create all these different types of values that you didn't have before, and you can name them specifically what you want. So Boolean really is just a checkbox. It's a yes or no type field. Date is a date, decimal, numeric, and text. I would say the Boolean and the text are probably the most frequent that I see people use. Having an extra date is always kind of nice. So if it really doesn't fit in with like departure date or the expense item date or the expense report date, you can have a third one on there. But normally it's pretty well thought out from that perspective. So let me show you guys what this looks like in Workday, and then I'm going to throw it over to Noman. So the task is enable custom attributes. Oh man. Enable expense configurable, excuse me. Okay, so we already have a couple floating around out here. So we have while traveling, on brand, if there's a meals provided, how many it was for, and then likewise these configurable texts. So if I go in here and look, this actually shows what expense items it is mapped to. For whatever reason you needed to change what these looked like before, you can actually go in and remove this and then uncheck that box. However, it has been used on expense reports in the past, so I don't tell people to do that. So I'm going to add one more here of who joined this fantastic webinar. Click OK. And then you just have to edit your expense item. Me personally, I enjoy something like this, so I'm going to call it entertainment. I'm a little bit of a goon when it comes to Workday. I'm all about it. I nerd out. So let's just add these in here. And then scroll down. Oh, or type in webinar. I do want to explain to users, nobody has to fill that out. I'm not going to make anybody do that. But then I'm going to create the expense report one more time. It's for a conference. Click OK. Hop over here and choose entertainment. And as you can see, who joined this fantastic webinar is there. So it's a really, really slick way to go in and add a couple of extraneous information that you might not have been able to collect before. Have a couple of different options there, dates, decimals, etc. But this is kind of a slick way to just clean up your user interface when going through and taking a look at the expense reports. So it is my pleasure to talk to you guys about this portion. I'm going to throw it over to Noman to talk about embedded analytics, and thank you guys for joining me today.
All right, thanks, Justin. Let me just make myself presenter here. Hey everyone, this is Noman. I'll be talking about the rest of the presentation. I'll start off with embedded analytics. So embedded analytics are kind of a useful tool. I think of them as a kind of advanced configuration. You've kind of figured out your business process now. You've seen the kind of pain points and bottlenecks that happen in the approval process. Now you're going on to trying to figure out how to solve these issues. So embedded analytics at its core really allow you to gain really valuable insight right within the context of the business process. So these analytics can assist your approvers in making informed decisions. In Workday, we want our cost center managers, our managers, whoever's approving these transactions, to actually look at the expense report, make decisions based on policy, based on kind of criteria we define to approve documents. We don't want them just clicking approve or even delaying approvals. So this kind of stuff can make it easier for them to kind of see all the information in context. So what it is exactly is embedded analytics allows us to kind of add custom reports and worklets that pop up on the business process step. So you can configure a report to show data in the context of the business process. For example, I can have a report that pulls up on a managed approval screen that shows them the current worker's total expense spend for the current year. So again, really cool to kind of see this, and it's available on a lot of different business processes. But today I'll be showing it to you for expense reports. So let me just hop into the tenant and show you what that looks like. I've already configured a report. So in my use case, my cost center managers aren't reviewing the data I want them to, and I really want them to look at the last 5 expense reports of the worker and see if there's any anomalies in there. So I've configured a custom report right here. I'll show you the back end real quick. So the data source I used here is expense reports for worker. It's a pretty basic report, it's an advanced report. Just have a couple fields here to show the manager the expense report, the date, the status, and the payment status of the report. In the filter, I just said don't include anything that's canceled. And then crucially, I've also added an extra prompt here for expense report payee. I don't want my manager to see all expense reports, only the ones in the business for the worker in the business process. So, and I'll show you where to map that. Right now, I added this extra field here to make sure they can see it. All right. So right now, this is just a regular custom report, but I want to enable this and have it be available for me to configure on the business process. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and edit the expense report, the report for the expense reports. And I'm going to head over to our output tab right here. Let's scroll down to worklet options, and I'm going to enable this as a worklet. The next thing I'll do here is make it available on embedded on tasks. So that tells Workday to make this available on business processes. I only want the top 5 here, so I'm going to change this 10 to a 5. In my share tab, I'm going to make sure that it's shared with all authorized users or the specific users I want to share it with. Just make sure it's shared so they can see it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK right now. And just make sure it gets saved. Okay, so that's my simple report that I've saved. Now I'm going to go ahead and add this to my business process. I'm going to navigate over to my business process for expense reports. All right, and the step that I'm having issues with right now is the cost center manager. I want them to see the reports right on their screen when they go in. So I'm going to do a related action off the step, go to business process, and then maintain step related worklets right here. So it opens up this screen right here. I can call the window that pops up a name. So I'm just calling expense review right here. And here it gives me a helpful kind of view of the fields that can be mapped. So remember, these are fields that are coming in from the business process, the current instance of the business process. So it tells me I can map expense report, or I can map worker. I'm gonna go ahead and add a new worklet here. I'm gonna pull in my custom report that I enabled as a worklet. I can choose to hide it when empty. So if, for example, if the current worker doesn't have any expense reports, it won't pop up in an empty report. I can choose to default it to expand or collapse. So if I want them to click into it to see it, I can default it to collapse instead. And then it pulls in the 2 different prompts that are exposed in my report, and I can map those here. So the roles is a kind of required prompt, and for that one, it's going to be cost center manager, because that's the one I want reviewing this. So I'm putting cost center manager right here. The expense report payee, I want that prompt to be dynamic. I want it to be mapped from the business process. So for that, I'm going to map it to the worker prompt, the one that came mapped up top right here. All right. So that's it for my setup. I'm just going to add one more report right here, just a chart, just to let my managers see what are the last expenses, the last 12 months of expenses for this worker. I'm gonna do the same thing here. Again, I added a prompt here for expense payee, so the manager sees just for the worker, not for everybody. All right, and that's it. I'm gonna go ahead and save it now. The next screen just gives me an option to kind of order the worklets any way I want to. I'm gonna leave it the way it is though. Okay, now business process set up. Now I'm gonna show you how it looks like. So I'm gonna proxy as the same user Justin was in as, Logan McNeil, and have her create a brand new expense report. Okay, so just create a real quick expense report right here. And the next step will be the cost center manager. I'm going to show you what the view looks like now that I configured the worklets. All right, so I'm going to pull in my cost center manager's inbox right here. And here's the approval step. And right when it loads, it goes ahead and loads me my reports I configured. Because I defaulted it to expand, it's going to show up right away. As you can see, as I put my reports right here, it's showing me the last 5 reports for this worker, and it's showing me this chart that I configured as well, showing me the expenses for the last 12 months for this worker. It works just like a normal report in Workday. So if I'm a manager and I'm curious about this expense report, it's kind of funny to have this same 5 expenses, I can drill in further, click on the related action, and see the details on the expense report. And obviously I can click this into a new tab to drill into the expense report. So right within the context of my approval step, I can see related information that's contextual to this worker. It's a really powerful functionality here. Once I'm done, I can go ahead and click approve. So it goes away when I click around the approval step, but I can get it back by clicking the bar icon right here. All right, so I'm all done. I'm gonna click approve right here. All right, so that was embedded analytics. I kind of just want to talk a little more about the use cases around this functionality. So this is really powerful functionality to have. I think expense reports, especially if you have policy concerns with, auditing on entertainment, for example, you can have filters with your predefined criteria. You can say, look, give me the last 10 expense reports that have entertainment spend. I can customize my reports to show things like validations. I may have expense report business process or custom validations that give you a warning when you don't require a receipt, but I want to see a receipt. So I can have a custom report that shows me the last 5 instances where my employee didn't submit a receipt. So it really depends on your use case, but it's really powerful to have to, again, enforce policy and have cost center managers or your approvers, whoever they are, be able to approve transactions without having to click around too much. We want them to encourage them to be kind of deliberative in approving their expense reports, but also make it efficient for them to go kind of approve a whole bunch if they have them. One more thing, I guess, is with, like Justin showed us with the class of service. Now, if I have an airfare and it's showing class of service, like if it's economy or coach or premium, I can have that be a custom report and a notification, a custom report and an alert as well. So I can have it pop up in my approval step that says if the class of service for this expense report or previous expense report was above my policy. So again, really cool, and just really depends on how you want to configure it. All right. So next, I'm going to talk about alerts and notifications. So alerts and notifications kind of follow the same kind of line of thinking. They're useful in sending important reminders and kind of helping our expense admins enforce policy. So alerts are just notifications that are based on custom reports, and they can generate on a regular schedule. So for things like unexpensed credit card transactions, if I have an issue with that, I can set up an alert that sends my users reminders to let them know they have credit card transactions outstanding. Business process notifications kind of work similarly, but they're based on the business process itself. I can have notifications that are driven by a step in the business process. So one simple example would be an expense report business process where if it's approved, it lets the worker know it's been approved. The message can be customized, and I can have dynamic fields that are again driven by the business process. So even this stuff, just like the embedded analytics, is contextual. It's not just a dump of a report where your expense admins have to work it and message people outside the system. It's something that can be driven by the system and be done on a regular schedule without any intervention. So let me jump into the system and show you what that looks like. The first thing I'm going to show you is a simple business process notification right here. In my example, I have issues. I issue cash advances to my workers, and I have a policy that if they expense the cash advance, they have to expense all of it or give a check back to the expense team. So I don't want people with money outstanding to just leave it outstanding there. Sorry, the wrong one here. So here's my business process right here. Here is my notifications tab. As you can see, there's multiple delivered system notifications right here. They're based on the standard approval steps. But at the bottom, I also have custom notifications. So here I have one that I've created, and I'm going to drill into it to show you what it looks like. So this notification first has a condition rule that just looks at the business process and sees if there's a cash advance on it. And if there's a cash advance on it, does it still have funds outstanding? If it does and the business process is completed right here, it's going to send a notification to the expense payee. And the message I've pre-configured as well to let them know that they have a remaining cash advance balance. I linked a field that tells them what the remaining balance is. And then I let them know that they have to expense the remaining balance or send a check to pay the company back. So again, a lot of flexibility here. It pulls in dynamic fields. This field is dynamic. It's based on the worker and the worker's current instance of their expense report. So really useful to kind of remind them about policy. So that's my business process notification. The next thing I'm going to show you again is my use case where I have a lot of credit card transactions that are outstanding. I want workers to timely submit those transactions because it's a corporate liability card and I need to pay it right away. So I need to make sure it's a legitimate expense. So I've configured a report to show me all credit card transactions that were not expensed in 30 days. And let me drill to the back end and show you what it looks like. So the data source for this report is credit card transactions. It's a pretty simple report again, just grouped by expense payee. And then I have total credit card transaction amount, and then the total amount of credit card transactions. I have a filter here that just looks at posted date is greater than 30 days, and the status of this credit card transaction has to be new. This just means if the credit card transaction status is new, it means it has not been expensed yet. So that's why I added this right here. I just want to see anything that's not been expensed. I've made sure this report is shared with all authorized users. And the last thing I want to do here before I run this is I want to test the report and make sure it's showing me output. All right, so it shows me that Logan McNeil has this amount outstanding greater than 30 days. So here's where I test the report, make sure it works, because this is the output that the employees will see. And the cool thing here is that they'll see only the output for themselves. If I have multiple workers here, Logan McNeil will just get a report with her transactions outstanding, not everybody else's. All right, so I've gone ahead and configured the report, made sure it works. Now I'm gonna go ahead and configure the alert. The task is just configure alert. I'm gonna pull in my 30 days expense report or credit card transaction outstanding. And it alerts the scheduled process. So if I choose to, I can have a recurring alert, weekly, monthly, just like a normal schedule or workday. I'm gonna say for run now to show you what the output looks like right away. I'm gonna call this my overdue CC transaction alert. It pulls in my prompts right here for my report. I just want to run for my one company, type in GMS USA. I can include a task with the alert. So I want my users to create an expense report, so I can include a helpful link to the task here. We'll say link to the create expense report task. For the recipients, I want it to go to my expense payees. And then here kind of works the same as a notification for a business process. I can have a kind of programmable notification here. I can say you have overdue expenses. And the body just please expense. Let's make it really simple for now. So this is my alert. It's gonna run for now, but again, I can have this run every weekly if I want to, every month at the end of the month if I want to do that schedule. But I'm just gonna go ahead and run it right now. All right, and it's all done. Lets me know that it sent a notification to Logan McNeil here. So I'm gonna proxy Inizer and show you the output. I'm gonna go to notifications icon right here. And it shows me right here that I have credit card transactions. So it shows me my message right here that I configured. Remember, I had the message in the subject and I had the body. Then it also shows me my transactions that are outstanding that are greater than 30 days. So this output right here is driven by the report. And again, even though the report showed everybody's when I looked at it, this alert is only showing her transactions here. And it shows me a link here to create expense report. So I can click in right here and just pull in my transactions. All right, and that's it for alerts and notifications. I'm gonna hand it back over to Justin.
Thanks, Noman. I'll actually take it from here and we'll see what questions we have. So it looks like we got a couple questions chatted in here. Thank you everyone for your your time today. So let's see, the first question we got was, can the merchant code mapping be loaded? Nancy or Justin, you want to take that?
Nancy,
Yeah.
do you want to?
I can take that. Yeah, so that task to map the merchant code with expense item can be a little tedious. There's actually a web service called Put Credit Card Code Mapping, I believe, so you can load them via EIB.
All right. Thanks, Nancy. Okay, let's see. Next question here. Are we limited to Workday delivered fields when configuring messages on custom notifications?
You shouldn't be limited to just the Workday delivered fields. You should be able to pull it in calc fields, and I've definitely done that in my own configuration.
Like those cool custom attributes we talked about.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Okay, and I think we have one more. Let's take a look. Okay, will the merchant code mapping or adding level 2 and level 3 data affect our current credit card transaction integrations?
It shouldn't, so I'll take that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so it shouldn't, right? So long as you're using one of those MasterCard or Visa credit card networks, you should be okay because it's already loading in all that data on the back end. And then really the primary difference is you just have to edit your expense items to include all the additional information that you already have. So.
All right. Short and sweet answers. Thank you, guys. I think those are all the questions we have today. If anybody has another question that maybe we didn't answer or you think of at a later time, please reach out to us. We'll make sure that we follow up with you as soon as possible after this webinar. And like I said, this webinar will be or has been recorded, so it is available for playback if you want to watch it back or share with your colleagues. It will be available tomorrow. So thank you again for joining this webinar, and thank you to our speakers, and we look forward to being in touch with everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, y'all. Stay safe.